welcome back to the Care Plan. My name is Jacqueline Boyd. I'm the owner, and I'm so glad that you've chosen to join us today. November is National Alzheimer's Awareness Month, and this week is a part 2 of a 2-part interview with Dan Kuhn, a memory care expert and advocate who has graciously agreed to share some of his knowledge with us. For our clients, the family caregivers that are doing the work every day, one of their greatest struggles when a loved one is diagnosed with memory loss is communication. The constant repetition, impaired judgment, and even the ability to complete basic daily tasks like hygiene or taking medications can be incredibly frustrating. We often see grown adults saying things like, "Don't you remember, Mom?" or "I just told you, Dad," because they haven't adjusted their expectations or their approach. So today we're going to take advantage of Dan being with us and talk a little bit about some communication strategies that you can use with your loved ones starting now. So Dan, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Can you share for family caregivers just a few ideas around communication to overcome some of those concerns and frustrations with repetition, with poor short-term memory? So please share your knowledge.
Yeah, so I've decided that this is like learning a new language. I've called it the language of dementia care because families obviously have known a loved one for years, decades in some cases, right? And so they have an established pattern of communication, and there's this expectation that they are able to understand and comprehend everything that is being said to them. And quite the contrary. I mean, people tend to focus on the memory loss associated with dementia, but the language skills are really quite impaired even from the very early stages. So they have word finding difficulty, they have trouble tracking conversations. So it's really up to families to take leadership here and figure out, how do I adapt my language to suit the needs of my loved one? And this takes enormous patience, but it takes some skill, and I think it takes practice to figure out how to simplify one's language and to make problem solving better for their loved one who is having a hard time making even simple decisions for themselves. So this is an extraordinarily difficult journey for them. I always say it's a process. It's not a destination. It takes time to acquire these skills and to learn the patience and the skills necessary to adapt to a loved one who is having problems.
Well, I think your analogy of a language is really meaningful and insightful because learning a new language is not easy, and one of the best ways to do that is to be immersed. So you don't fully grasp a new language unless you've had opportunity to use it every day and to practice those skills. So I think that's a really wonderful way to think about the opportunity.
Yeah, and it's not just an intellectual exercise. I think for many loved ones, it's an emotional challenge to really accept where somebody is at in their dementia. I mean, we try to take their dementia away with drugs. We try to rule out things that may mimic Alzheimer's and other dementias, and we try our best medically, but nobody's been able to crack this mystery. So learning to accept this is an enormous emotional challenge. And so for families to accept that sad fact, I think is a step in the right direction to help them change their language and their behavior in relation to their loved one with dementia.
Well, and we all learn differently. So I'm wondering for folks whom the idea of learning a whole new language might not resonate, there's an approach called the best friends approach that I know you're very familiar with as well. Could you talk a little bit about that approach?
Yeah, so the best friends approach was really created out of the experience of a couple of social workers running an adult day center in Lexington, Kentucky, and they quickly realized, how inadequate the medications were for people living with dementia, and so they really focused in on the importance of relationship, and they used the concept of friendship because it's universal. Everybody hopefully has a friend, and we count on our friends to help us in good times and in bad. And so they realized that the best treatment for somebody with dementia is having a best friend. And that means accepting people where they're at, coaching them along in a gentle way to do things that they might not always want to do, and engaging them in meaningful activities. And so that day center was renamed the Best Friends Adult Day Center, and it spawned a whole cottage industry, if you will, of about a dozen different books with the Best Friends title. These are books by David Troxel and Virginia Bell. Virginia Bell just turned age 95 recently.
Oh my gosh.
And she is still volunteering at the center that she helped found 30 years ago. And she's just a giant of a personality. And she said to me one day, I'll never forget it, she says, Dan, this is not rocket science, but it takes a big heart to do this kind of work. And for families to accept how to change their heart is a really difficult journey for them.
Absolutely, absolutely. I so appreciate you sharing those two approaches with us. Thank you. I think there's something there for everybody, hopefully. Another challenge that we see frequently as a care navigation agency is that solo agers, or people who identify as elder orphans, or for us, we do a lot of work in LGBTQ communities where people are less likely to have children. So for folks who maybe just are thinking they might have memory loss, the beginning stages, or have been newly diagnosed, what's your recommendations for those people and any advice you might be able to share?
Yeah, if indeed people are on this journey to greater impairments over time, there is a need to look ahead and figure out alternative living arrangements or to get in-home services so that they can continue to live in the privacy of their own home. It's estimated 20 to 25% of people with dementia are living alone. So they're in their homes where they've lived a long time, they're in apartments, there may be in independent living communities, at retirement centers, but they're pretty much on their own in such places. And so they're going to need some help. They're not going to be able to manage their medications, they're not going to be able to manage their money, they're going to need help with legal and financial planning. So they need to turn to others for help. Otherwise, they run the risk of exploitation, they run the risk of not having their basic needs met. So I always recommend that people seek out help, including care management, especially for those who don't have families near at hand. Care managers are an extraordinary resource to those people who want to live as independently as possible and in their homes as long as possible.
Well, thank you so much. That is great advice. I'd like to just tell you how much we really appreciate not only you appearing on this series, but for you and the work that you do every single day out in the field, helping families, training caregivers, providing with social workers and nurses the information they need to really connect with people who are experiencing memory loss. So that's it for our two-part series. We will see you soon. Take good care.
Thank you.